yes, there's a focus on autonomous weapons and industrial base, but we should not overlook is like, okay, how do we get the stuff where it's needed?
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the US Department of Defense each year. But so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley. Remember the Berlin Airlift? The World War II era feat of logistical mastery, in which an Allied plane landed every 30 seconds to resupply 2 million people trapped behind the Iron Curtain for 11 months. Could this sort of blockade ever happen to us, the United States, here at home? Well, one company thinks so, and they're working hard to make sure it never does. Airspace Intelligence got their start helping airlines optimize routing to save fuel. But today, their modern logistics platform does a whole lot more. At the Reagan National Defense Forum, I met up with Phillip Buckendorf, the company's founder and CEO, to talk about his mission, his vision, and the company's progress. From a German university focused on international relations to an obsession with predictive commerce, Phillip and his team are building software to help America's defense apparatus move from a reactive footing to a proactive one. Fascinating conversation, and I hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reagan National Defense Forum. I'm here joined by Phillip Buckendorf, the co-founder and CEO of Airspace Intelligence. Phillip, thanks for making time for us, man.
Of course. Great to be here with you now.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see you. All right, so you have one of the most interesting backgrounds of people I've spoken to. Your eyes are getting wide, but you did not grow up in the United States. You're born in Germany. And yet you are about as passionate about defense of the United States of America as anyone I've met here today. So where did that come from?
Yeah, so studied political science and international relations. Wanted to combine that with tech, and then basically straight out of college, moved to the U.S. mostly out of frustration with the degrowth mindset that I saw in Europe and Germany specifically. And
what does that mean? What does that? What does that
mean? I think it becomes more visible from the U.S. now. Like you see it a lot. I mean, there's a lot of chatter around, like, obviously kind of the stagnant economy in Europe and all of that. Coming from Europe, it was visible much sooner. Really poor policy decisions that were made around energy, that were made around foreign policy, that were made around the economy, and most importantly, tech. And so many of the issues did not seem fixable. And I think a key part for that is that the common opinion in most European countries is actually aligned with what the policy is today. And so when people ask me when will it change, I'm always saying it actually has to get a lot worse before it will get better, because people support actually what is happening at the moment. And so it wasn't very much aligned with what I thought is most important for the collective West and for the Western Hemisphere. And moved when I was 21 or 22. And soon actually spent more time in the US and Germany. So yeah, the family's here now. Our daughter will be born in DC in March.
Oh, that's really exciting.
So yeah.
Wow, man. Congrats. That's a big deal. That's you have the company as a baby, and now you have an actual baby.
Two
children. That is fascinating. What is interesting to me is that I think many of the decisions that you're talking about in Europe are decisions that we've also made in the US. I think there have been a lot of bad policy decisions on technology, on energy, on foreign policy. But it seems like maybe we have the ability to reverse them.
I think this might sound a little crass, but I think there's an order of magnitude difference in terms of like how poor the decisions are that have been made.
What have been the worst?
Okay, this is a pretty well-known example, but like Germany, like basically pulling out of nuclear energy. Catastrophic mistake.
Yeah.
Germany's entire economy is basically built around manufacturing. There's no software, right? That's not the strength of Germany. It's all about manufacturing. And like if you look in just from first principles, like what are the inputs that go into manufacturing? It's the raw materials and energy, right? So if you have high energy prices, like you just cannot compete. And then if like the majority of your economy is like export oriented, like how is that going to work? It just doesn't.
Yeah. So I mean, we've had a nuclear. I don't know if it's a nuclear winter. We've had a cooling of interest in nuclear energy in the U.S. for 2 decades that now seems to be reversing, right? Am I am I wrong on that? What do you think?
Again, I'm not an expert in the domain, but I think what we certainly see is it starts with innovation, and it starts with I think a public opinion. I mean, that's a great thing about democracies, right? It's like the end of the day, and that's truly what I believe in. It happens what the people want.
Yeah.
It just takes time. Democracies are slow, but end of the day, it happens what people want, and I think that's what we see specifically like now. I think with the incoming administration, I just see so much excitement for change, and I'm very hopeful that it materializes. So.
Yeah. No, it's exciting times. If nothing else, we are almost certain to get a younger generation.
I mean,
leadership.
looking like our generation, right? And it's like everyone is like in builder mode and wants to change, and that's great.
Yeah. No, I agree. What's interesting is that your background, thinking these kind of big IR poli sci thoughts, but you were tech focused very quickly. You started a company, this kind of predictive commerce, you called it, right? And now logistics. What drew you to that particular field?
Coming out of college, I basically had a thesis in terms of like what are the 3 stages of like basically software, right? And if you look at it, like the first stage of software was all around like just data entry and like some optimization, right? But completely disconnected workstations, right? Internet didn't exist, right? That was kind of the first step of software. And then from there we moved to like, okay, now like devices are connected, like data can be shared, right? But it was still, and I would argue that's still true for like 99% of like software systems that are being deployed, no matter in government or on the commercial side, those are like data displays at the end of the day. It's like you integrate data, you fuse it, you have pretty and shitty interfaces. But end of the day, all what most software does, it just shows information to the user, right? And I think the third phase is going to be like how do you basically provide users with a prediction of what's going to happen across various industries. I think in commerce, specifically with like assistance, it's the anticipation of what someone is going to purchase, right? In autonomous driving, it's about understanding like where other road users are going to be and like how an autonomous vehicle navigates through that dynamic environment, right? In defense, I think one of the really big theses behind airspace intelligence is the transition to move from like the single pane of glass real-time real-time kind of interfaces and displays to predictive displays that are basically showing like what are future needs, what is the future state of the environment, what is the future state of the battlefield, and how can you form a decision now that is optimized against that future state.
Yeah, I think that is one. I'm impressed by the fact that at 22 years old you had the 3-part thesis like that. That's a lot more strategic than many than I was at that age. But that's and to see you kind of living that out is really neat. I think I want to so seeing where you are in that. Let's kind of bring it to airspace intelligence and what you're working on today. I think I'd seen you were initially thinking you would work on autonomous vehicles or something like that. And then you had this contact with the airline industry, and kind of your relationship.
Not just the airline industry. I mean, basically the first 6 months of airspace intelligence was like my co-founders and I are basically touring air operation centers across the airlines, the government, and in fact, actually also like in the maritime domain. So we were
really across all right away.
Across all domains in many ways. I mean, just for background, like, so we worked on autonomous driving before. This was around 2016, 2018, where we liked the technology challenges that we were solving, but we were kind of very frustrated with the mercenary cultures. Those were like the days where a lot of venture capital went into autonomous driving. Everything was like overly hyped, and it didn't really feel kind of real. And so we were curious, like how are like kind of domain prediction problems, trajectory prediction problems solved in other domains, and for other industries. And the air domain was an incredibly interesting one, for two reasons. One, you have one more dimension, which is increases complexity, and then two, um, it felt like it's a domain that, specifically on the commercial side, that everyone believed is solved, but it actually is not. Everyone believes that an air operations center has like the most advanced software, and then when you walk in, it's like basically IBM green screens.
Yeah, there's a very, I mean, sure, you're probably familiar with the story of the founding of Kessel Run, and Eric Schmidt goes to visit the KAOC, right, in Qatar, and it's like pucks on a whiteboard. That in many ways is, it's better, but arguably still not solved. So I actually, before we move off of autonomous vehicles, why do you think that is? Why do we still not have? We don't have driving cars or self-driving cars. We don't have flying cars. Like, what makes that so hard? Why is it taking so much longer than many expected?
I mean, I think I would argue the progress at least to me, the progress on autonomous driving over the last 2 years has been a lot faster than what I anticipated.
Interesting.
And I think we're also seeing, we're seeing the overlap of like what is possible for technology and what is a use case. I think Waymo is a great example. And that combined with a business model, and that I think is now the breakthrough where like pure research is actually getting operationalized.
Yeah.
And that is a big breakthrough that I think recently happened in that domain. And I must say, like it happened a little sooner than what I anticipated, which is great.
That's great. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, we've been hearing about it for a long time, but maybe the technical challenges have been more significant than folks kind of understood. If you take kind of I know from a first principle standpoint on some of the challenges that you saw when you're dealing with the air operations centers or air, airspace logistics generally, what were were these hard technical challenges? Were these just kind of like implementation challenges? What were the fundamental like jobs to be done or problems to be solved that were lacking?
All right, now we get started. So let's start with product. So I think on the product side, and to some extent, we covered that with like what I've always been pretty passionate about. It's you walk into an AOC and like every single display is basically showing the state of the airspace or the state of the operating domain. But then when you talk to users, they plan for a flight that is 4, 5, 6, 7 hours long, and they plan actually 2, 3, 4 hours prior to departure. So they're basically having a planning horizon that is like somewhere between 6 to 10 hours. And so with existing software, what they have to do is they basically look at like where's weather right now, where's turbulence, what are the wind conditions, and then they basically plan against that now picture. But obviously the aircraft is going to kind of move across space and time while the environment is going to change, right? The weather is not going to be where it is in 4 hours, where it is now, right? It's going to change, it's going to move. And so that is true across pretty much all like geospatial features. And that is really like what we focused on, which is like, how can we simulate to the user where let's say the aircraft or the object that they are the vehicle that they are responsible for, that they are planning for, how can we simulate where that object is going to be in space and time relative to how the domain is changing? And so getting that right was pretty complicated, both from a technical perspective, but even more from a user perspective. One of the hardest, like user adoption perspective, like one of the hardest things is we're dealing with users that have basically made decisions against like static displays for like 10, 20 years of their career. And so now they basically make a decision against a predictive picture. And like that, it's like when we talk about it, it sounds like, well, what is so hard about it? It's actually a really fundamental change.
Behavior change.
And it's a massive behavior change. And so basically getting product right was one major challenge, and making sure we get the kind of help the users on that journey as we build product. The second part was the the organizations we started working with, again, like on the commercial side, mostly the big airlines. Again, those are organizations that work like very, very similar to the government. It's like it's not a, and I would say in many ways, like rightfully so. It's not, they cannot just make a decision and say like, hey, great, Phillip and team, come in and like deploy, and tomorrow everything is up and running. It just doesn't work that way.
You want them
right?
to move slow with your life.
And so it is, I think then you have like, how do you build a company? And we've like talked with many other founders on this topic. It's like, how can you actually build a company that you harden from all angles against long sales cycles, right? So what does that mean from a financing perspective? What does it mean from a go-to-market perspective? What does it mean from a culture perspective inside the company, right? You want the company on a day-to-day basis to still like move really, really fast. Just because sales cycles are maybe 2 years plus, right? You still want to move fast, right? That shouldn't be an excuse to why we can't do something today, like, and shift it to tomorrow. No, we still want to do it today, right? And so I think building a company culture, building a financing structure that is from all angles kind of tailored towards breaking into industries that can't deploy tomorrow, but that basically take some time, right? And I think that's something we did pretty well at ASI. I mean, we made a ton of mistakes on the journey, but I think that's like one of the things that
that's kind of the point of a startup, right? Just make mistakes and learn from them quickly. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have?
No, I think those were the key things. And then I think building a team that has a great balance between outsiders and insiders. Really, really critical for us. So I think if we would have started like building the founding team, the initial engineering team, mostly with like insiders, we would have built product that is similar to legacy systems. So I would say pretty much the first 10 to 12 team members at ASI were all outsiders. But what we saw then was like very much the problem of like, okay, we're making like too many unforced errors, right? And that's when we brought in like basically subject matter experts or domain experts, like folks that have been in the industry for 10, 20, 30 years. But it was crucial to get those hires right, because the profile is basically individuals that bring all the experience but are willing to forget all of it and only kind of impose or enforce it when needed, when they see the company is just about to make like a really dumb mistake.
That is a hard persona to find.
It's a very hard persona to find, and I think we were very fortunate to kind of on how we navigated like that transition of the team, which was like as we moved from like about 10 to like 20 to 30 team members. But
what's a leading indicator of that kind of behavior mindset? Did you guys figure out, is there a good test, or is this like, how'd you do it?
I think I think those are usually individuals that have been in the industry for quite a while, but never really fit in. And they always kind of wanted to be in the kind of more startup, fast moving environment. But like the legacy organizations they have been in, they never really allowed them to work the way they want to work and build the future they want to see the future, the way they want to see the future. And so, I think that's those are the unicorns. But
no, it's interesting. There's something about, it's like someone of the world but not or from the world but not of it, where it's they know enough but they don't necessarily identify as the kind of the typology from that world. It's really interesting. The other thing I thought that came to mind as you're talking about this is establishing credibility with those early customers, where if you are all outsiders, I mean, these are highly regulated, legacy industries. How do you build that trust early on to even get them to give you a shot?
I think I think there's always this interesting mix between, like, as an outsider, I think you're always a little more interesting than maybe an insider. But then to others, you're like just weird. And so it's
charlatan.
Like, so it's and I think that then really comes also down to like, how do you pick your first customer? So they're more interested. We're just finding you weird. It's kind of a dating thing.
It's a search problem.
It's a search problem. And I think one belief we have, but it was both true for our commercial business as well as our government business, is like finding the right first customer. And like one of our investors, Roy Bahad from Bloomberg Beta, he hammered into us. Basically, in the first year of the company is like how important the first customer is. And for us, it was about on the commercial side, like our very first customer was Alaska Airlines, and they were just the perfect partner for us to start. We would have not been able to build the company without Alaska and all the great work we did in the first few years of the company. Just in terms of like the environment they have, and as well as the size of the airline they are. I think when we were a small team, like supporting like one of the largest airlines in the country would have not been possible, right? But again, if we would have worked with I don't know, like a regional carrier or like business aviation operator, we would have probably gotten all the wrong learnings that would not translate to end of the day impacting like the majority of US air traffic, which is something we want to accomplish on the commercial side. And so I think it's being very, very thoughtful, specifically when you're in industries that have long sales cycles, like who's your first customer. And the other part is like in like the critical industries as well as defense, it's small environments, right? And your customers like all know each other and they talk with each other, and like reputation is super important. And so you want to make sure that you have a first customer who has a use case to which you can really deliver success. It's like hyper important.
I want to one more question on kind of the commercial and early days, and then I want to pivot to one of your newer use cases. When you think about an audacious goal like impacting the majority of U.S. air traffic, where are you on the journey towards that goal?
Yeah, we're impacting about a quarter of all U.S. air traffic at this point.
It's pretty friggin' huge.
Yeah.
What has to happen for you to get above 50%?
Just continue doing what we do.
Execution.
Just execution.
That's
and
a pretty good place to be.
Yeah. And I think that's like. I think that's in general, like that's our view on like how a startup succeeds. It's execution. I don't believe there are like others that solve the problems for you. I mean you can have a support network, obviously with investors, etc., that can help accelerate things, but at the end of the day, a company has to figure it out. And I think like nothing is easy. Just it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of persistence. And end of the day, it has to be exciting, and this is truly exciting for us. And so we just keep at it and do more of what we have been doing, and scale it.
Well, let's then pivot, because you guys obviously, once you got that foothold and you felt good about the kind of the commercial space and the peacetime logistics, let's call it, space, you've kind of adopted a new thesis, or expanded the thesis into how you can assist with contested logistics. And I think you have a pretty provocative piece on the website about, hey, look, remember the Berlin Airlift? Like, that could happen here. That could happen here in the United States, and would we be prepared for it? Like, our homeland could be under siege. Tell me about what's the inspiration for that thesis? What are you seeing that gives you concern?
Yeah, I mean, maybe to back up a little bit, the definition of ASI was always like dual use. The question for us actually in year one was like, do we start on the government side or do we start on the commercial side? And one of the core beliefs is like, end of the day, like government like should have working solutions. And we just identified that the commercial sector is a better better kind of way for us to start, iterate quickly, prove that there's actually industry that wants to buy the software, and it kind of is good enough for that. And then once we reached that milestone, it was for us, okay, great, now the company is like ready to start doing business with the government, and deploy there. Coming back to contested logistics, I mean, I think what we observed is there's and I think in many ways, like rightfully so, there's a very strong focus obviously on autonomous weapons, strengthening the industrial base, making sure there's a manufacturing capacity. I think at the same time there's a very strong focus on the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan specifically. But I think if you actually take a step back and you just kind of look at it from first principles, well, it's such an overused term, but I think this really makes sense. It's like
founders love this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, 80% of the U.S. force is based on the homeland, right? And the entire industrial base is here, right? And then the U.S., I mean, in many ways, it's the greatest gift from a geopolitical perspective. You've got like a massive ocean to the west and a massive ocean to the east, right? And I think the key priority is like, how do you get the stuff out to the nodes and the points and the forward deployed bases where it's needed? And putting Taiwan completely aside, I know it's controversial, but just for a moment, like there is already a conflict between China and the US, and there will be, no matter the Taiwan issue. And the key strategy that China has is like basically blocking the US from its homeland to get stuff out. And that starts with the homeland itself, mission critical infrastructure, telecommunications, and I think both in the cybersecurity domain as well as in critical infrastructure, like there are a lot of concerns. And I think it's important that yes, there's a focus on autonomous weapons and industrial base, but we should not overlook is like, okay, how do we get the stuff where it's needed?
Yeah. The enablers of any other operation.
100%.
And that's been the
And
source
we feel that does not get enough attention in many ways.
I think that's right. I mean, so interestingly, I think supply chain in the other direction has gotten a lot of attention, which is how do we get, we're dependent on
yes.
things that are coming from China or manufacturing that's happening abroad.
But how do you get stuff out?
And how do you get stuff out? Yeah. I would tend to agree that I don't think that gets discussed very often.
Yeah.
So how are you guys going about that?
How do we go about it? I think the first part for us was like, how do we stay kind of true to the mission, right? How can we deploy the capability that we've proven on the commercial side and deliver that to DoD? And that's basically how we started, right? In many ways, the thought process we had on the commercial side, we just redid the same, which is like, who's the right customer in the beginning, who has the biggest pain point, and with whom are we the most aligned in terms of like what our offerings are, and then deploy quickly, right? And that is kind of what we did over the last year. Now the focus is like, how do we scale that? We have the first kind of success cases, right? And like one thing we announced this week is like basically ASI going multi-domain. So we've been very focused on the air domain, very challenging domain. We wanted to get that right, and now it's about like, how do we generalize that across sea and land? Because end of the day, logistics are multimodal, and you have to kind of connect all the domains to really provide the most value.
Yeah, I think when you think about one of the big themes in kind of military affairs of the last, I don't know, 5 years, maybe even longer, we name it different things, but it's all domain operations or joint all-domain command and control. And that's like the command and control is the operational side, but you don't, I think to your point, you don't hear as much about all-domain logistics. Like, how are we going to get the stuff from air to sea or from sea to land and all these
and then
things.
Specifically with like the like large distances in mind, or like, I mean, how do you anticipate what the needs are, right? Like, what needs to be where and when?
Yeah.
And then how do you kind of back propagate that, like basically simulate back to where it comes from, and then what's the best way to get it there?